Leilu Nishmat Hacham Elie ben Shafiye Ruach Hashem Tinichenu B'Gan Eden Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Ha'olam Sha'akol Nihiya Bidvaro. Can you picture the scene? Over 1,000 people standing outside in the rain by a levaya without reacting to the weather, as if they have no idea what's coming down, because they just realized what went up. They just realized. Who did we just lose? And the tears and the crying. It wasn't just the tears and the cry over the loss of a rabbi of our community. No. Those were different tears. Those were the tears, those were the crying and the emotions of a people who just lost a father. They just lost a grandfather. He was everybody's father, everybody's grandfather. And Rabotai, open your hearts. Because right after when the Aron began to move down that block, and the people slowly walked behind the great Hacham, they started to tell the stories. And you walked in between the people. And you started to listen to the stories. And what was amazing to me is nobody told over the same story. Every person had something personal. His own Chacham Elie story. A story that happened to him on a personal level. His tzara, his problem, his family, and how his father showed up at the door at the time we needed him most. Everybody was telling their own stories, and I stopped for a minute and I realized, Rabotai, I said to myself, this is amazing. There is an undertone. There is a calling. There was a scream. Quietly, if you listened well, there was a scream amongst the crowd, and the people were screaming to Chacham Elie, 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 lama azavtani? What am I going to do without you now? Who am I going to turn to now? You see, the reason why he was a father figure to every single one of us is because he didn't need to be called. He showed up. A father doesn't need a phone call when he hears his child is sick. He heard somebody was sick. He's knocking at your door. He walks into the house. He sits down by your dining room table. And everyone's looking at each other. I can't believe it. Chacham Elie is here. How did he know? And they start to bring him out a tea, and they bring him over the person that needs the beracha, and he puts his hand on his head, and he sits there half hour as if he's pulling out the trouble, the problem, the sickness, the ba'ayah from the person who needed it. Because when a child is sick, the father doesn't need to be called. He comes running, and he shows up. And just then, while he's sitting there in the living room, giving out the berachot, I've seen this many times, the mother of the house starts calling all her friends. Chacham Elie is in my house. Come get berachot. And people start coming down the block. And they come into the house. Chacham, kifak. And through the beracha, he was not just giving over the blessings that were in need, but he brought a new vibe to the whole house. He was misameach the entire family through the berachot that he showed that he would never miss. And you know, when there were people, has v'shalom, lo aleinu lo alechem, but over the years, when there were people in our community that was in trouble, and he found out that somebody was in trouble, I heard this from a guy personally, he says he had a big problem, he was in trouble, He came home one night, his head was totally not with him. He says, Rabbi, I walked down the block, I walked up to my house, and there was the bicycle. And I saw the chicken in the back in the box. And I knew, Baruch Hashem. I walked into my house, and I knew the Hacham is here, because he knew that I need him. I need his beracha. I need to be able to reach out to someone who cares about me. And this was such a powerful concept. It made no difference to Chacham Elie how religious the person was, how not religious the person was. Lehefech, at times, I'll be honest, I saw that he was sometimes showing a closeness, maybe more, to the people in the community that felt distant than the people that were close, just so they should know you're not alone. You're a part of my family, and I'm your father like everybody else in the community. And then he put his hand on your head, and he brought your head down. And to me, that was a tremendous musar. Be machnia. Because the first step to every single Yeshua that a person needs, first, be machnia. Put your head down. Drop the ga'ava. Be prepared to realize that only Borei Olam can help you. Get ready to be machnia in front of the only one, en od milvado. And when you felt the weight on your head, you also felt the weight off your shoulders. He took it. And you walked out like we heard earlier, and you don't know how, and you don't know why, and you don't know, but you felt lighter, you felt better. And he was a master. He was a master of Pashtut. He was able, like nobody, to reach the hearts of the people and unburden them. He had a way of just looking you in the eye and say, Al tidag, Borei Olam. But he said it in a certain way that it hit you. And you felt better. And you felt closer. This is an unbelievable gift. He listened to the problems of people, Yomam Valayla, and he never got tired. Lehefech, he called. He followed up. I know people, including myself, who came to him at time with different problems. And actually a week or two later, he would call out of the blue and say, so you see a difference? So you see a difference? He didn't ask you, is there a difference? That wasn't the question. He said, no, so you see a difference? This was someone who loved us as a father. It's amazing to me how he did not allow us to see him for who he really was. There's a very wonderful and simple Syrian Shami man amongst us that many of us know. Years ago, he ran a trucking company, and he was in partnership with a goy. Happens to be the goy was an Arab. One time he came delivering something to the block of Chacham Elie, and the Chacham saw him, and the Chacham calls him and tells him, come into the house, I want to give you a beracha. So the guy comes into the house, and the Arab partner comes in with him, biyachad. So the partner's standing in the other room. He's having a cigarette. And our guy is under the hand of Chacham Elie getting the beracha for 25 minutes. The Chacham's done. He turns to the guy and he says to him, who is this guy in the other room? He says, Chacham, that's my partner. I says, yeah. What's his name? His name is Mufit. The Chacham screams out, Mufit! Talahon! By the way, I was going to give this derasha in Arabic, but I decided somebody has to say something. So he said, Mufit, Talahon! Ta! Od? Od Yinavum B'Seva. Right here. The Arab comes in, he sits down next to the rabbi. The rabbi puts his hand on his head and puts him all the way down. And he doesn't move. And he sits like that for 10 minutes. So people are trying to whisper to the rabbi. They're trying to clue him in. Ki'ilu he didn't know. He says, Chacham, lo mishelanu, Aravi. And the rabbi says, I know. But he also was created by Borei Olam. And if Borei Olam wants to take Kavod Shamayim from him, it can come from him too. So he puts his hand down on him again. And he keeps mumbling. And he finishes. It was after that they both pick up and they leave the house of the Chacham. A year later, these two partners, the Yehudi and the Aravi, they split. Each one goes his own way. Do you know what Mufit did? Mufit now went out and opened a slaughterhouse on Coney Island Avenue. Big sign, Mufit, halal meat. Rhymes. Mufit, halal meat. A slaughterhouse for chickens and for animals. After a few months, Mufit starts doing very well. And he calls up his ex-partner and he says to him, hey, you know there's a lot of Russian Jews that are coming to me. And they're buying my meat right and left. They think that there's no difference between kosher and halal. He says, the Chacham, the one that gave me the blessing, call him. Tell him to come to my slaughterhouse. I want him to do the shechita of you Jews. So like this, all these Russians, when they come and ask me for the meat, it will be kosher and not what they think is kosher. Chacham Elie heard this. He ran down to the slaughterhouse. Nu Rabotai, how many years? How many years do you think he did this? For 10 years. For 10 years. He's doing shechita in Mufit's meat, halal meat. Why? Because there were thousands of purchases from Russian Jews who had no clue. And because of him, out of this guy came Kavod Shamayim. Because the Chacham, he cried and cared about every single one of us as a father. Rabotai, you have such magnificent Rabbanim that's coming up to speak, orators. I don't want you to waste time with a simple wordsmith. I want to tell you just one last idea. Did Moshe Rabbeinu know that he was Moshe Rabbeinu? I always had that. Rabbi, what do you think? Did Moshe Rabbeinu know that he was Moshe Rabbeinu? Did Moshe Rabbeinu know that he was the manhig of Klal Yisrael? Did Moshe Rabbeinu know that he was the melech of Yisrael? Did Moshe Rabbeinu know he was Rabban Shel Yisrael? Did Moshe Rabbeinu know Lo kam b'Yisrael od? Lo kam b'Yisrael od ki Moshe. Did he know that on him it's going to be said that there will never be anyone greater than he? Did he know this? If he knew this, how in the world was he anav mikol adam? How is it possible? Lo kam b'Yisrael od ki Moshe, and the same person is the anav mikol adam? Isn't that a tarte de satre? Isn't that a living contradiction? And the answer, Rabotai, is you got the concept of anivut all wrong. You know what anav means? Moshe knew he was Rabban Shel Yisrael. Moshe knew he was the manhig. Moshe knew Lo kam b'Yisrael od ke Moshe. And he also knew that it had nothing to do with him. Borei Olam gave that to me, and he could take it away at any time. No credit, no kavod. It has nothing to do with me. And that's why, to me, it was not a shock when the levaya of Chacham Elie was the night of Zayin Adar. But you know, again, Chacham Elie did it his way. It wasn't the Levaya on Zayin Adar Bet. No, because then everyone's going to say, ooh. So Chacham Elie said, let it be Adar Aleph. Because then it's Gadlut B'Tzin'ah. It's Moshe Rabbeinu's Levaya, his yahrzeit, but it's not the one that's celebrated. So it's done quietly. Gadlut B'Tzin'ah. Zayin Adar Aleph. That's the way Chacham Elie lived. Gadlut B'Tzin'ah. Zayin Adar, Manhig, Gadol, Lo Kam B'Yisrael, but B'Tzin'ah, Adar Aleph. Take it down a notch. I don't want anyone to celebrate. I don't want anyone to see. That's the way I want it. To me, this is an incredible thing. Rabotai, later on in his life, he changed shuls many times. And people never understood why. I know somebody that's very close to him. And he told me that he picked up a pattern. The minute he prayed in a shul and they started giving him too much kavod, Rachfia, he's out. He's out. To the next shul. Until they give him too much kavod, goodbye. And he goes to the next shul. Until they start giving him kavod, he leaves. No. Anav mikol Adam. He did everybody's brit milah. And he would never take any kavod. He ran around giving the aniyim meat and food, matan beseter. He didn't want anybody to know, Chacham, we caught up with you. You ran your whole life, but now you can't run. Now the stories are coming out. And we're going to find out who we had and who we lost. One person told me that the rabbi told him, let's go to the slaughterhouse. He drove him to the slaughterhouse. The Chacham walks into the room with the animals. The animals knew him. He walked into the room, they all ran. And he started talking to them. And he started telling them, come, this is what you were made for. He would take one, slaughter, package it quick. And then he would go around with a few of our guys. I could see a few of them in the crowd that did the drivings with Chacham Elie. And he would go from he would tell him, this house over here, that basement over there. Drop the meat off by this house over there. They need it. And the guy would tell the Chacham, what do I do? He says, just take it, go up to the door, knock on the door, hang it on the doorknob, and run. That was his style. Zayin Adar, yes, Gadlut. But Adar Aleph, sheket. Sheket. Gadlut B'Tzin'ah. So here's my end. Why a bike? Why a bicycle, Rabotai? This is too much for me. Why a bicycle? He didn't let us honor him. He took measures to make sure that you couldn't give him the kavod, even if you wanted to. But I believe it's a deeper idea as well. Because he did not want to come off as a great rabbi. He wanted to be your father, your grandfather, your jiddo. Because he wanted to be approachable. Rabbis have awe. Rabbis have a certain way about them. He didn't want that. He wanted you to be approachable to him. He wanted you to come to him. He did not want you to think twice. You have a problem? He wants you to come. No, I'm bothering the rabbi. No, you're not. This is what I'm here for you. I'm here for you. And therefore, he took great measures to show the pashtut, to be approachable. But there's one more idea, and that is, I once hinted, I didn't have the chutzpah to ask, but I once hinted. I said, Chacham, I'll give you a ride. Why do you need the bike? It was a nice way of asking the question without asking the question, kacha, the way they taught us in yeshiva with the lumdis. Chacham, you don't need the bicycle. Come, I'll give you a ride. So he says, no. He tells me the bike is buddy. It's healthy. I said, oh. I said, but Chacham, come, let me give you a ride. It's more kavod. He stopped. Kavod? Kivodo male olam. That's what he answered me. You know what I understood that answer to mean? I will never get in the way of where the kavod belongs, and it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to him. And therefore I will take measures that you don't give me an iota of kavod, so that the kavod will only go to where it belongs. Rabotai, I met the Chacham on Avenue U for the first time on his bicycle. He came riding across the street. He rode right up to me and he said to me, Rabbi Duvi. I said, Shalom Chacham. How are you? He says, Haneched Sheli, my grandson, Ohev Otcha. My grandson loves you. He loves you. That year, his grandson was in my class. He was a boy that had such life. He was a boy that loved to sing in class. A talented boy with such chen. I said, Chacham, I love the boy. He started laughing. Chacham, I'm not joking, really. Ani ohev oto. I love the boy. He says, I know. And he's laughing. He says, Zetob. He says, this is good. This is good. How many times he talked to me about the young in the community, the guys in the community. How many times he told me about you have to be shomer alehem. How many times he told me about the love to give to our young. Because he was a beacon of that love. And boy, did he give it. Rabotai, there were many, many times I called him with problems of the community. And many times he told me, Al tidag. 2 weeks later, I call him and say, Chacham, Baruch Hashem, the problem is taken care of. You know what he told me over the phone? Ken, kvar kiblu et tefillot min hashamayim. One time there was a problem that came to me and I called him. And I said to him, Chacham, please help. And he says, Al tidag. I called him 3 days later and he said to me, Ani mamshich. Ani mamshich. I called him 3 days later. Ani mamshich. That Sunday he calls me and he says, Rabbi Duvi, kvar kiblu et tefillot min hashamayim en ba'ya. 2 days after that, I get the phone call from the person that we were trying to help. And min hashamayim, the problem was gone. If somebody down here can tell you what's going on up there, then that means he had a say while down here, what is going on up there. So now that he's up in Shamayim, Kal v'chomer, he has a say. He's davening for us now. This Arayat, this unbelievable gathering could have been on Thursday. You know why it's today? Because this is Chacham Elie's signature. I'm not going to change from the old country. I'm the grandson of Chacham Nisim Nidbo, Zechet Tzadik Libracha. He was the bridge to the old country. He brought us the pride back home, and he told us, don't change. Don't get whisked away with the winds of America. Don't get carried away with the materialism of the United States. Remember who you are. Remember your gadlut, your strength of where you came from. While his students were driving around in $100,000 cars, he was riding a bicycle and he had pride like none of us. And that's why today, says Chameli, the Super Bowl. No. You're coming to me. Come back home where you belong. Let's give up the shtuyot. Let's remember who we are, where we came from. And now that we have our greatest advocate in Shamayim for our community, a father and a grandfather, he's going to continue to pray for us so that very soon we'll feel the hand on our heads again. Thank you for listening.